We're talking with Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. How did you become a marine biologist? I don't think I've ever met a marine biologist, and I definitely have never met a black marine biologist. So, what
Well,
what
hello.
steered you?
Nice to
Hello,
meet you.
hey, nice to meet you as well. What steered you into that?
um, I think a lot of kids want to be marine biologists, right? It's a pretty common dream job for kids when they find out like that's a job you could have is like hanging out in the ocean and learning all about what lives beneath the surface because it's fascinating, right? It's amazing. And I'm one of those kids who's like stubborn enough to be like, no, really. Like I'm in. Like what does this mean? Like what do I have to do? But I will say, I mean, my parents, I grew up in a working class family in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, when brownstones were $40,000 instead of $4 million, like they are now. And
Okay.
it's been a massive transformation of my home community. Um, but it was like a ridiculous dream for a kid from Fort Greene. But my parents, like we only could afford like one or two family vacations my whole childhood, and we went to Key West, Florida, and stayed in this little bed and breakfast with a pool. And I learned to swim, which is something a lot of Black kids don't get to learn because of the legacy of racism in this country and Black people sort of being prevented from using public pools or beaches and all this stuff. So parents don't learn and they can't teach their kids. And then Black kids have this like much higher rate of drowning because of it. So I got to skip all of that. And my dad is Jamaican, so he grew up at the beach. He grew up swimming and fishing, and so he passed that on to me. And I went on a glass bottom boat ride, and I could see through the bottom of this boat and see a coral reef and see all the colorful fish swimming around. And I was just like, what is happening? There's like a whole other world under the surface of the ocean. I need to know everything about it. And like, what is it called when this is your job? And I held a sea urchin in my hand, and they have these like hundreds of like tube feet on the bottom. That's how they like crawl on the seafloor. And you hold it, you can feel them like crawling across the palm of your hand. And I was like, these are magical aliens. I have so many questions. I'm
Wait,
in.
it didn't shoot you with venomous poison, the sea urchin?
No, no, no. They just like
Because
crawl
they do
around.
that,
If you
right?
step on them and their spines go into your skin, that's one thing. But if you hold them on the bottom, they're just crawling around.
Yeah,
Um,
I had a friend that got stung or shot with sea urchin spikes, and it was
yeah,
very
don't step
painful.
on them. That's no good.
Don't
I've
step.
done that. I don't
Okay.
recommend it.
Yeah.
You have to dig them out of the bottom of your feet.
And
But if
for
you
the
just
record,
hold
yeah.
them,
Okay.
yeah.
And they someone told them that if somebody pees on them, that it will reduce the sting. That didn't work. So just
You
saying. All
you
right. So
can like put your foot in vinegar and it'll help dissolve it because it's like calcium carbonate, like like hard chalk, and so it'll help dissolve it. But yeah, I don't know that you need to like go peeing on each other.
okay.
Um,
So all right.
so
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 you went
I
to
wanted to be a marine biologist, and then when I was 10, I watched. I'm sure you've seen the Eyes on the Prize series about civil rights movement. I saw that and I was like, okay, clearly new dream job. I'm going to be the lawyer that gets the next Martin Luther King out of jail. Seems like a safe job, but also like super useful contribution to the movement. And then I went backpacking for the first time when I was 15 in the forest, and I was like, clearly being a park ranger is the best job ever. Like, sign me up for that. And then I learned that like everything I loved was threatened: the coral reefs, the forest, the air, the water. And I decided I should become an environmental lawyer and like help like defend nature. And then there was this moment I realized I could do all of those things, right? You can fight for justice, you can learn all about the science, you can do law and policy work, you can protect nature, and that's basically conservation. Like ocean conservation is all of those jobs combined. And so I was able to basically have all four of my dream jobs at once. Clearly, I'm like an all of the above kind of girl.
the first time you got to go deep into the ocean. Tell us about that.
Ooh. So scuba diving is like this ridiculous magical thing where you can breathe underwater. And because I had done so many years of gymnastics and dance as a kid, that actually really helps because you have to like super detailed control of your limbs, because like your buoyancy is different and you can be like flailing around. You have to like really focus on staying calm and just like breathing evenly, or else you like breathe through all the air in your tank and like that's it, your dive is over. And so I was able to channel all my like modern dance training to become a super efficient scuba diver. And you basically like have this opportunity to see what feels like it can't even be on this planet. Like octopuses crawling around and like reaching all their arms in these crevices of the coral reefs, like looking for whatever they're going to eat, and like sharks just like swimming so slowly by, just like cruising, and all these fish sort of like nibbling algae off the reefs, all the parrotfish, and then the urchins all in the crevices. And I did my PhD research in the Caribbean, in Curacao and Bonaire, and I spent a lot of time underwater trying to figure out how do we make fishing more sustainable? How can we redesign fishing gear so that we're wasting less fish, but fishermen can still make a living? And so that's what I did. I like tried out all different designs of fishing gear, and basically, like, this is going to sound really dumb, but if you put a small, skinny, like slot in the corner of your fish trap, then the baby fish get out. But it takes, like, for science to prove that rigorously with statistical significance, you have to go like 300 scuba dives and try out all these different designs and like really run the numbers. But the result of that work is that this like fish trap I designed is now required by law in several different Caribbean islands, which feels like a good contribution, right? So we think of like,
do you have a patent?
Technology.
Do you have a patent for that? I'm sorry, Dr.
No,
Johnson, do you
and
have a
that's
patent?
on purpose, because like I want everyone to use it, right? Like I don't want to bogart this. Like I want it to be something that everyone can sort of take on and use as they see fit. And the lesson there was just like, if you listen to the local government and community, like what do they need? And they're like, we need to figure out like how to be wasting less fish with our fishing gear. And I was like, great, let me just try some experiments and like collaborate with fishermen to redesign this stuff and work with the government on what the policy should be. And it's not all about like high tech and satellites and GPS and like Internet of Things and AI, right? Like you can just do some like practical low tech stuff that makes a really big difference. So I think I would just encourage folks to like, when we think about how are we going to save the planet, like it's not going to be high tech. A lot of it is just going to be like listening to people who are close to the problem, like fishermen in this scenario, or like indigenous people or farmers, people who live near power plants who are like, we got to shut this down. Like listening to the people who are like seeing it all firsthand and figuring out, okay, like what is the simple thing we can do here in terms of redesigning equipment or putting new laws in place or holding corporations accountable that would really make a difference.
What's the most misunderstood sea life? Sea life that we...
Dolphins. Everyone loves dolphins. Dolphins are jerks. They're rapists. Stop loving dolphins.
They're rapists.
They're mean. Everyone thinks
are they?
Dolphins are like super sweet. Yeah, no, they're just like, I'm not a fan.
They're
of
rapists? Are they? I thought they were super smart.
All this attention. They're super smart. For sure they're smart. But yeah, they get all this attention. I'm just like, this is a distraction from like what we really need to be focusing on, which is
so
like
don't swim with the
mangroves.
dolphins? Okay.
And like all of these ecosystems like mangroves and seagrasses and wetlands and marshes that absorb like 5 times more carbon than a forest on land. Like we just never give oceans any credit, and they're literally holding it together when it comes to climate. Like half of the photosynthesis in the world is happening in the ocean. All these coastal ecosystems are the physical barrier that's protecting us from storms that are coming at us that are stronger and wetter because of climate change. There's, it's the food security, it's the culture. Like who wants to live in the Caribbean if you can have a fish fry, right? Like miss me with that. Like we have to figure this out. So yeah, I feel like we always want to focus on like the charismatic megafauna, as we call them, but like parrotfish are eating algae off the reef every day and keeping it from getting overgrown, and like they deserve more love.
Than the dolphins. Okay. And the scariest, because I remember going to Disney and
Scariest.
swimming in the Disney thing. And that was when Steve Irwin had just been killed by one of
By
the,
stingray.
yeah. And I was like, there were like 1,000 stingray. And I was swimming. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to die. Because I was afraid that
Yeah.
that was going to happen.
That was a weird freak accident. Yeah. I think one of the scariest things to me is like jellyfish. There's like, but not in the Caribbean. The ones in the Caribbean like will sting you and you'll be fine. But there's some like really fierce jellyfish that can kill you in the Pacific. So like if you're in like remote Pacific island, like definitely keep your eye out for jellyfish. But otherwise, like the ocean's not out to get you. But
What
like
about
know that
barracudas and
you're on its
piranhas?
territory, right? Like
Hold on,
you're not
Dr.
in charge.
Johnson. How do you avoid piranhas and barracudas and sharks? Because sharks are now. I'm in Jersey. They're coming up on shore a lot more closer to
Yeah.
us because they can't find food.
So sharks and barracudas are not usually piranhas are freshwater, so I don't know anything about freshwater, so that's
Okay,
find
that's
another
something
guest for
else.
that one.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
But the issue the issue with these other things is if they get confused, right? Like you're not their food. They're not like, where is the next human that I'm going to eat? But they get confused, right? So for like surfers who are sitting on a surfboard wearing a wetsuit, from the bottom it looks just like a seal. So you're confusing them and you're in their house, right? So like don't confuse them. If the water is really rough and they can't see, like the only time you'll ever get bit by a barracuda is if you're wearing a bunch of shiny jewelry and it's really, murky water and they think you might be a little silverfish. Otherwise, they just like are weird looking fish with a big underbite that swim super slowly and like want nothing to do with you.
oh,
Um, so
okay.
I think it's just like they're not going to attack a human unless they like somehow mistake you for food. And sharks are not going to attack people unless there's like some weird situation where they get confused. In fact,
Or hungry.
we're supposed to no, I mean we're not delicious. They like bite us and spit us out. Sharks don't like eat whole people ever, right? Like you get bitten and then they're like,
And they're
gross,
like, "What is this? Oh,
give
this
me a
person has high
grouper.
cholesterol."
Give me
Tui.
a tuna.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
You've never had any mishaps in all the time in the ocean, Dr. Johnson? No?
No,
Okay. Listen, I mean, and
not
I
on
think that's a
hundreds of
testament to your
scuba dives.
training. Okay. So what
Just
can
don't
we
go
do?
sticking your hands in any holes and you'll be fine, Like just know your place when you're in like another ecosystem where, humans aren't supposed to be. Like just have a little humility.
That is advice for the ages that I think we don't take as people, especially Americans. 866-801-8255. We're talking with marine biologist. She is a specialist in conservation. Is there a place, because I'm looking, I have very little faith right now in human beings. I don't think they're going to change. They don't even want to wear a mask to
Mm,
save themselves. Is there a place we can go? Because I was looking at that island where if you come up on it, they kill you on sight. And I was like, I can't
what?
go there because they'll kill you on sight. But the concept of that is pretty badass. Like they don't want to be bothered. Like if you swim up or boat up, they're gonna like hit you with a poisonous dart. Is there a place that
I've
people
never
can
heard of
go?
this.
Okay,
Remind me not
I'll
to
drop.
swim across the ocean to this island.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. I'll drop a link in the chat here so that you will avoid them. Is there a place we can go that there is not a lot of human footprint or fingerprint where we could stay when the ish hits the fan, there's a place that will not be impacted by the ish hitting the fan? Is there such a place, or we're all going to be
The
impacted?
short answer is no, right? Because you go to some remote island and then the sea level rises. And then what do you do? Or the storms. So some of the major impacts of climate change are the temperature rises. So if you're close to the equator, it's going to get just like unbearably hot, right? Like we already know what it's like in the summer in Georgia, for example. Like it's hot and it's going to get way hotter. Like New York City is going to have climate like Georgia. So what does that mean for Georgia? Like it's not good. And so
Mm.
there's a temperature that's increasing. There's like just more extreme weather, like stronger and wetter storms, more droughts, more flooding, more fires, like more tornadoes, like more of all of the bad stuff. And then there's sea level rise, and that kind of stuff too. So basically, like the answer of like where we should live, I think it's, sort of rethinking where we live in relation to food, right? Like we need food to survive. Where are we going to be able to grow food? How can we sort of have more people move into rural areas, right? Like we spent the last, 100 years of everyone moving to cities, and now we're in this, tenuous situation where, like, God forbid, the boat doesn't come, or the truck or the train, like where are we going to get food? And so thinking through like what it would mean for more people to move into rural areas, which is scary because they're really red, as we discussed. There's like a lot of people who are extremely conservative, and have a lot of guns. But that's also the way to flip permanently our Congress towards policies that support human rights, the environment, democracy, you name it, right? Like if a bunch of people move to Wyoming and upstate New York and, the Dakotas and Oklahoma, like we would have a completely different political system because of the Electoral College, which, is a whole other discussion. Like, should we get rid of that? Because, it was built to support slave owners having more say in our government than they should have had. So yeah, I think when it comes to like where do we live to survive the climate apocalypse, like think about there's great maps that have projections on what is the temperature going to be like, how much is the sea level going to rise, and where are going to be good places to grow food. So in the U.S., it's mostly northern places. It's like New England, the Pacific Northwest, like Michigan, like that whole strip in the north is going to be where you want to be. So there are actually some mayors from different cities in the Midwest and other places who are like preparing for more people to come, because they're like, people are going to want to move. What are we going to do if they come here?
And they're leaving New York in droves. Yeah. New York City.
Yeah. Well, the people who are leaving New York City are people like me, right? Who can work from anywhere because they're like writing a book or hosting a podcast or something that can be done remotely. They have enough income to like just get up and go. But most people can't do that, right? Like the average income of the people leaving New York is like way, way higher than of the people staying. And it's like, it's rich people who are leaving New York City, or people who have like a great plan B. And most people in the US, because of so many decades of not really developing the support network and caring for each other, using policies to care for each other, people don't have a plan B. Like everyone is stretched so thin, especially with unemployment through the roof right now. Like, where are you going to go?
Right. Damn it.
So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do to think about like how do we create a future that holds all of us in the context of climate change. And so that's what I work on. Like I'm no longer scuba diving and counting fish and working with fishermen. I am 100% dedicated to how do we envision and design a future where we are safe, even though the climate will continue to change, which it will. Like my think tank, Urban Ocean Lab, is all about what is the future of coastal cities. It's a policy think tank, so it's all about like how do we make sure we have the legal framework in place to support the transitions we need. And the book that I just released last week, which is all about like climate solutions and what does the way forward actually look like.
And your podcast. How often do you do your podcast? How often do you do your podcast?
It's a weekly podcast. It's called How to Save a Planet. It's a production of Gimlet Studios and Spotify. And our last episode, actually just released last Thursday, was called Black Lives Matter and the Climate, all about the connections between racial justice and the climate crisis. And our guests were Maurice Mitchell, who runs the Working Families Party and was one of the people who was there as the movement for Black Lives was originating in Ferguson, and Colette Pichon Battle, who's from the Bayou of Louisiana, who's talking about like what does it actually mean to get it right, and sort of transition into adapting to climate change in a way that really centers justice. And she is just one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. So I would encourage folks to listen to this last episode of How to Save a Planet and get some like Bayou wisdom in your ears.
We're gonna put a link at SXM Urban View, which is where we tweet out all of the information,
Great.
all the guest information, and of course there'll be a link to Urban Ocean Lab, and of course there'll also be a link to your new book. 866-801-8255. All we can save. All we can save. Truth, courage, and solutions for the climate crisis. That's you and Catherine Wilkinson. That's your. You guys did that together. You edited this book. It's beautiful.
It's an anthology. So it's 41 essays by women leading on climate across the U.S. Colette, who I just mentioned from Louisiana, has a piece in there about how she helped her community recover from Hurricane Katrina. It's got a NASA climate scientist and the heads of like NRDC, this large conservation group, and soil scientists and farmers and policy experts and journalists and artists and architects, because it's going to take all of those skills, right, to figure out how we transform all of these systems to adapt to this new world where we're not just burning fossil fuels anymore. And it was such an honor to bring together all this wisdom into one book, and it's selling super well. Like, the press support has been incredible. And it's got, a bunch of poetry in there and original art. It's like very much a multi-layered experience for people who, are trying to learn more about what is actually going on with climate. It's not full of like big fancy words and complicated science. It's like written for the average person who just wants to know more. And the idea is that, like, when you're done reading it, you'll have a really clear vision of not just the problem, but the solutions, and hopefully ways that you can be a part of those.